Yo.
Hi.
Okay, can you hear good?
Yes, I can.
Your audio is very low. Is your
It's not good. Hold on. Let me see if I fix that. Okay, how's this? Is this better?
It's a little bit louder now, and what I'm trying to do is get so that my level is loud enough for you, but it's not super louder in the actual broadcast mix.
Okay.
Which you are a little quiet for, but do I sound too loud or good?
You sound good on my end.
Alright, now I also need to see if this sounds good or like too loud to you right now.
Now imagine yourself with a spherical eye.
Yeah, that's a little too loud.
It's loud, yeah, because I have to turn the level of this way down and still listen to your level.
Hmm.
This is the only way I can get all the sound to mix for the way I want to make this.
All right.
Thanks for coming. I'm just trying to do this tech part so it will work the way it's supposed to work.
No, that's fine. I understand.
Without wasting your time, that's like a silly paranoia, I realize it.
No, no, it's okay. I'm available for a while, so you don't need to worry about that.
Nice. The first thing I need to troubleshoot is the two things: how loud you are and how too loud that playback just was. I can down level that using Audacity. I'm giving it a -4.
On your stream, you sound echoey, by the way.
Yes, there's a reason for that, which is I have to listen, and the microphone's hearing the listening, and that's why it's echoing. I'm gonna run a sound
Oh,
check
okay.
real quick. That will allow me to just be sure that that's what it's doing, because I've been nailing this particular issue down. This is a new headset.
All right.
The tech part's amusing because I love tinkering with this stuff, but like most people just get frustrated right away. But I worked in IT for 9 years, so like I just enjoy tinkering with it. But other people like are they're like, still waiting. It's hilarious.
Yeah, it can be a pain depending on who you are.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you're the kind of person who likes tinkering or gets annoyed by tech problems.
It depends on how like random the problem is and like how long it will take for me to fix it or something. Because sometimes you find those random problems that last like an hour or two, and you can't find anything about it online or something.
Yeah, there's a magic point between how much time are you willing to have wasted and how much are you actually enjoying it or being inconvenienced. Inconvenience is so amusing.
Yeah. Sometimes problems are just more like they're more interesting than they need to be, or should be, I suppose.
Problems are interesting. That's definitely the only thing that can be said for them.
Yeah,
Um,
that too.
I'm still mediating the audio level because first thing I have to really troubleshoot is the feedback. But the problem is I have to turn off the mic in order to check that real quick.
All right.
All right, fixed it. Did I not?
Uh, do you want me to check the stream for you, or
I can check it, but then the microphone's gonna hear me checking it,
yeah?
and I won't be able to detect whether it's working or not. I'm using the phone to also do a secondary check, so the microphone will hear, but it won't be as bad.
Yeah, you're good. I don't hear any echo or anything.
Yeah, the echo
Any
should
sound.
be gone now, except for what we're about to hear from the phone as soon as it starts playing. Yep. So you could hear the phone, but I can hear that the echoing in the present moment of speaking should not be there anymore.
Yes.
Perfect. I can hear you, and the level seems pretty equal. I think I'm still slightly louder than you in the actual mix,
Hmm.
which is only way I can think to help that is if you have a way to make yourself louder on your end.
Yeah, I should be able to. Um, how's this?
Yep, looks good.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect, because now I can hear you slightly louder than I can hear me in the monitor.
Okay.
Okay, now we can go with the preface title card. I just ran through this first draft a second ago. I'll probably use the first draft for what is in the final episode that goes up, but like we're making the episode in this way that I do, and that requires announcing and making announcements about it for a minute. It kind of lets all of your other pieces for the game fall into place, how they're going to be for the actual part that comes after the announcements. It's two parts: the announcements and the part after the announcements.
Hmm. Okay.
All right, now tell me if this one's too loud or not.
It's a little too loud, just a little bit. I think. It doesn't sound that bad. I can also probably turn down my audio a bit. Yeah, that sounds good.
It kind of depends on how loud you're listening to me, because I'm trying to get so I'm not much louder than the sound, but about the same.
Hmm. All right.
So if that's like 5 times louder than me, it's a problem. But if it's like about the same or a little bit quieter, then we're fine.
So are you gonna be talking while you're playing that, or?
No, that
Oh,
was
okay.
just a level check. I'm probably
Okay.
not even going to play that any more than just those times that I just did.
Oh, okay.
The real thing that is the intro, we're going to start right now, and then we'll launch into the part that's questions.
Okay.
Nice. Okay, let's try it. Missing one thing, though. There it is.
Now imagine yourself with a spherical eye. You can see all around. Now what's in the middle? See? Even if I have all this behind me in view, suddenly I will find that there is something in the middle of it all. There's a hole in the middle of reality. Like now, there seems to be not so much a hole but a wall, but any animal which had eyes in the back of its head would have the sensation I'm describing. Now, you may say to me, eternity, oh, it's a curious thing. How can I face the fact of nothing, which is by definition not a fact? You see? Why, that's one of the people who want to rule the world. It's to frighten you about death. Death is real, see? I mean, don't indulge in wishful thinking. All you people who dream of an afterlife and heavens and gods and mystical experiences and eternity, oh, you don't face the facts. What facts? How can I face the fact of nothing, which is by definition not a fact? You see? All this is eternity, oh, from whichever way you look at it. So if you really go the whole way and see how you feel at the prospect of vanishing forever, of all your efforts and all your achievements and all your attainments turning into dust, nothingness. What is the feeling? What happens to you? It's a curious thing that in the world's poetry, this is a very common theme. the earthly hope men set their hearts upon turns ashes, or it prospers, and anon, like snow upon the desert's dusty face, lighting a little hour or two, is gone. All kinds of poetry emphasizes the theme of transience, and there's a kind of nostalgic beauty to it. A banquet hall deserted, after the revelry, all the guests had left and gone their ways. The table with overturned glasses, crumpled napkins, breadcrumbs, dirty knives and forks lies empty. And the laughter echoes only in one's mind. And then the echo goes. The memory, the traces are all gone. That's the end, you see.
This is Beastcraft Monastery. This is where we are. Welcome. Today we have Jabba-the-Hutt 2. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing so amazing I can't even come up with any words that describes it.
That's good.
I appreciate you coming on to participate in a concept podcast that I've been designing.
I'm happy to be here. I know you talked about it for a while. It seems really interesting, so I'm happy to, give some input or, be a part of it.
One thing people come to find about me is that I have lots of ideas, but they move extremely slowly.
Sometimes, the best ideas take the most time to create.
That's the funny thing about ideas is, in order to properly use them, you have to do the whole thing. There's no way to cheese it. There's no skip. You can't speedrun it. The only thing you can do is slowly walk and very, very quiet until you catch the idea. When you pick it up and start using it, and do all the work that it is with the idea to figure out what the hell it's talking about. That's creativity. It's a slow walk. You can't cheese it.
That's true. That's true. But it's a good walk though.
It's
A
amazing.
nice
It's brilliant. It's the literal manifestation of our joy and of our freedom. That's really what play means. The topic today is speed gameplay and parable enjoyment, which is the thread by which I come across Jabba-the-Hutt 2 in the Twitch world after an experience with the game, Stanley Parable, and the beginner's guide that pretty much exceeds all other game experiences I've ever had, up to that point anyway. So I've probably never met anyone else that likes the Stanley Parable as much as I do, except for you, which is why it's a privilege to bring you on and have a chance to make content with your voice here.
I'm glad to be a part of it. Stanley Parable is a very fun game, and I enjoyed the mystery of it, along with the other aspects and concepts it has.
It's really such a mysterious game that, as I studied people's reactions to it, it seemed like a majority, or at least a large number of people trying to explain how they feel about the game could only really convey being puzzled in a way that seemed kind of frustrated. It seemed like it frustrated people in a way that was just amusing to me, but I wondered if they were really that frustrated, or if it was just something in the magic of the exact way that the game delivers its mechanics.
I mean, there's so many things to interpret from the game, because there is no clear answer throughout the entire game. There's no clear thing that goes on. That for most people, it's usually confusion, and they come up with their own ideas for it in that moment. Um, and it can be interpreted in many ways, which it has been throughout years of just uh, people playing it and stuff and experiencing it, along with the beginner's guide as well.
Yeah, there's a really, really interesting um, conversation, I would say, evolving in the space where the Stanley Parable takes place. I've noticed because there have been a number of people covering it right from the very beginning, and then even more so recently because of the Ultra Deluxe hype. But what you just said reminded me of the description of the game. If you pull it up on Steam and you want to know what the Stanley Parable is, I want to go ahead and read that to open our discussion here.
All right.
And I have the Steam page pulled up here, but I want to put some music behind this. I'll do that later, though, actually, because we both know how the game sounds at the very beginning, from countless amounts of times beginning in Stanley's office. Yeah, so on Steam here it says, The Stanley Parable is a first-person exploration game. You will play as Stanley, and you will not play as Stanley. You will follow a story, you will not follow a story. You will have a choice, you will have no choice. The game will end, the game will never end. So as I was playing the Stanley Parable, except not playing it, it's like NOT-playing. As I've been not playing Stanley Parable recently, because I'm working on not playing the Stanley Parable for 5 years right now, it occurred to me something, and that is that once you begin playing the Stanley Parable, you can never ever leave. And as I slowly realized that, I started to amuse me just a little bit more how funny it is to say that it's an achievement to not play the Stanley Parable for 5 years. Because if you could never ever leave, then you could never not play it for 5 years, except for the 5 years before the first time you played it.
Yeah. I think the thing with it is that it leaves a long impact depending on how you interpreted the game, and especially if you've played the game multiple times and you did everything that you could um, to see the world of it. Um, it really does leave you questioning a few things when you go out of it, or technically speaking, you don't go out of it, but if you try to go out of it, if you try and think about it, your mind sort of plays games with the ideas that it gives you. And so it's this overlonging experience where if you don't play it for a while, you go back to it and you're like, maybe something else changes. Maybe an experience has you thinking differently, or something about this is different to what you originally thought. And there's so many things you can take away from it that it's just a big combination of what ifs and thoughts and ideas that anybody can get.
Yes, it's really so massive that I have trouble putting this in words. But I've been looking at content specifically about this as I pondered the question. There's a YouTuber named Jacob Geller, and I excerpted a little bit of his content that specifically speaks about the beginner's guide, but also shows some Stanley Parable footage and uses the Stanley Parable in the main point that's being made. But the main point is the power of mythos, the idea of a concept so large that you literally, once you glimpse it, it's literally like an eternal resonation that just echoes. And it's the size of the thing. Like, the word mythos is the only thing I can use to kind of like say it in a single sentence. Um, so the act of spending enough time in the game to like completely absorb the impact of that to the point you're actually able to convey it is, I think, an unusual feat. But it's kind of also inevitable by players that it really spoke to. Um, Specifically, the whole meditation element of spending so much time in the game to master it, to discover the skips, to discover the parts that vex you the worst and have the most difficulty for you in order to pass through successfully. These are all meditation elements of the speed gameplay that I kind of noticed as I pondered specifically Stanley Parable speedrunning. But that feeling of coming back in the game and then having to think the question, well, was this here in the first place, or is the game somehow changing over time? And my experience of it has literally changed because I just encountered something I've literally never ever seen before, despite countless hours being spent in the gameplay. I was
Um,
curious if you played the first Stanley Parable.
the Half-Life 2 mod, you mean?
Yeah, the original playable version, let's
I
say, because I'm
have.
actually going to talk
I've
about.
also speedrun it. I haven't played it in a long time though, so my memory isn't the best of it. But I do remember it being basically it is like a smaller version of what the actual game is trying to do. I feel like the Half-Life 2 mod encapsulates some of the elements it wanted to do, but it couldn't capture everything because it was just a mod. So when the actual game, I feel like captures a lot more and does it much more justice than the mod does. I feel like the mod is a snippet. It's like a tiny clip of a movie, while the actual game is the movie, and it's like you get the full thing, you get the full experience right there.
Totally. I can't actually remember how I encountered the mod version, how I heard about the Stanley Parable the first time. I think it might have been the PC Gamer website while I was reading about like some MMO or something. I happened to see a post about it. But I remember playing in the first version that you could play, um, when you go down the stairs and you start realizing that you can't see your feet and there's a voice describing all your actions. Uh, there's a Nine Inch Nails soundtracking that comes on at that point, so I was particularly struck by it as a huge, longtime Nine Inch Nails fan and listener at that moment. It's actually from the
Yeah.
Ghosts album, so I have that memory from the original game, but I can't actually remember how I came across it. Did Were you following the Stanley Parable before it was playable, or at what point? What was your initial
Uh,
experience of finding the game?
my first experience was, of course, YouTube. Um, I think around, because I'm trying to remember the exact date the Stanley Parable came out. So hold on, go to Steam real quick because I have to refresh my memory on that.
Yeah,
2013. It was probably around, let's say, like 2014, 2015, around those times. This is very late into the game, but I um I found it one day by accident by I think a bigger YouTuber. I can't remember which YouTuber, but I remember watching it, and I was like, okay, this is very interesting. This incapacitates me. I like this. I like what I'm watching. Um, and I watched them play it a bit, and I just completely. I was like, okay, I have to buy this at some point. So eventually, I want to say maybe a couple months later, I finally bought it. I finally played it all the way through. Um, and I was amazed. I was like, wow, this was incredible. This was beautiful. This has brought a lot of questions to me. I really enjoyed it. And then after that, I found out about the mod. And so, well, I didn't know how to do the mod because I didn't know how mods worked at the time. Years later, I finally figured out how to implement the mod into Half-Life 2. So I finally played that for the first time, and I enjoyed that as well. I had the same experience of like, wow, this was really good, but I can tell this could be improved upon, and it was proved upon. The actual game did did more in a good way, and I like that it kept the same narrative and same ideas that it did with the mod. So um yeah, that's basically it.
yeah. The original playable version had pretty much all of its possible paths that you could do in it also exist in the updated and complete version. Um, some of them are slightly variegated, I remember, but I haven't actually gone through and like fully absorbed the original playable mod version in the context of my total immersion, I would say, into the experience of the complete game. Which, when you get down into it, it's not just the gameplay. It's also the Raphael trailer, the other trailers, and the demo content, and all of the, even to some extent, fan content and ideas that were spawned by other players of the game. And there, I haven't played the Raphael Parable mod sub game, but I want to for the stream at some point. But the whole mythos of the game is so powerful that anytime you get into that type of a piece of work that's come forth, it's like a whole beast where it spawns people's ideas and people's feedback and narrative that's necessarily coming forth from individuals and individualized to each person's experiential differences.
fan. I still am. I like Nintendo, even if they, are questionable at times. But I enjoy. I was a very big Nintendo person. I never had a PlayStation or Xbox growing up. I was a Nintendo only. So for most of my life, I had just been playing Nintendo games. Um, and I'd say it was really fun because I like Nintendo. I like their cartoons and well, not their cartoons, but their cartoonish like atmospheres and stuff like that. So for a long time, it would just be Mario games I really liked. I think my favorite, like one of my favorites, was like Mario Galaxy 2. Something about it was really amazing to me. Um, so finally, once I made the transition to PC, I started getting into more, PlayStation, Xbox. I started seeing more of other types of media and gaming, and I finally stumbled upon the Stanley Parable, and it was so brand new to me because I hadn't seen nothing like it yet. I had never seen a game that was basically not really a game as it was somebody just walking. Which I mean that is the game, but when you think about it, it's walking with a purpose. It's not anything. It's not trying to be anything crazy. Not an action, not shooter, nothing like it. It's just trying to show you something. So after I played it, I really liked it. Um, and I was like, okay, this is one of my favorite games now. It's definitely up there. Um, and after playing it, eventually growing up more, getting more into PC gaming and stuff, I finally started streaming. I found speedrunning. I'd always been interested in it, but I was like, I could never do this. There's no way I could put the time and effort into it. But turns out I can because I find it really interesting. It's a fun hobby of mine. And Stanley Parable is one of the games I decided to do. I started off small, started with a fan game of a different game, and I eventually got to the Stanley Parable, and I started to learn it more, and I started to play it more. I started to see the different elements of it, and I became really happy with what I was doing, and I enjoyed it, and I just enjoyed playing the game. I enjoy hearing the narrator. I enjoyed the process of how it works. So it just kept building up over time.
Yeah, it's really that building feeling is difficult to fully convey because like I have had other favorite games that I deeply loved and was impacted by, but I never, like you, I never had the impulse to go speedrun a game or do something other than just replaying it, from time to time or in small bursts. But I want to talk about Mario and Nintendo specifically because when that game came along, nobody had ever seen any kind of interactive medium or form of an experience where it would ask you, so, well, do you want to stand still, do you want to jump, or do you want to walk forward? Those were basically the three things it was asking you. So instead of going, do you want to go through a left door or a right door, it was just, well, do you want to sit here standing still and get hit by the Goomba, or do you want to try and jump over it? Like, it would send things your way and give you the ability to walk forward. But in essence, your character's still just kind of scrolling the screen, and you're just standing there in the middle of the screen doing what the character does. And so Stanley Parable walks in as the first game to take that idea and make it more dimensional and expand its depth in a way where you now had the ability to turn around and go backwards, walk forward, take the left door, take the right door, and have an interaction with yourself that was kind of the same way Mario was, to come on and show something no one had ever been asked to.
This is it. This is what video games are all about. This is how you do it. This is how you make a fun game. But as I grew up more and I started finally leaving my Nintendo phase and started going into other aspects, I realized that video games, uh, like the Stanley Parable, it can be more than just running, jumping, and hitting or killing enemies. It can be more than that, and the Stanley Parable, I think, conveys that in a very cool way because you could take somebody um, who plays like a certain video game, like puzzle games,
Yeah.
and you show them the Stanley Parable, I feel like at some point they would be like, okay, this is a puzzle, but in its own way. They'd be very engrossed in it. They'd be very interested in it. I feel like you could take people's perspectives on it in completely different ways, and I think that's a beautiful thing that the Stanley Parable does.
Yeah, precisely. The reason why I wanted to preface this part of the talk with Nintendo is that basically as a little kid, I absorbed that message, what you just said about being puzzled and having the mystery of it fully captured into your heart. Nintendo somehow did that non-verbally in the Mario gameplay specifically. It did so with techniques like one's called parallax backgrounds that allow you to feel a perspective of a very far off horizon that you're somehow interacting with as you interact on the main foreground. But Stanley Parable did that in a completely different way, and one that it was equally as compelling. And a lot of that extra content I mentioned earlier that is kind of it's part of playing the Stanley Parable, if you really love the game, uh, has a very haunted feeling and a very that's the end, everybody's gone liminal kind of feeling, like in the
Hmm.
intro segment that I played for you today.
Yeah. I think one of the best ways to convey that feeling of like everyone's gone and stuff is the ending that is it's very, you can leave it up to many interpretations. It's the downstairs ending, as I call it, the one where you go downstairs instead of going to the boss's office. For me, when I first played that, I got very anxious because it was so, it takes you on a roller coaster in just like under 10 minutes. And I think that was a very clever thing that they did, was they managed to make you feel so many different emotions in under 10 minutes for one ending alone. And I think it was beautiful. I like it, but it conveys the idea of feeling alone and stuff, and feeling, all of that.
It was a puzzling ride, and that downstairs ending is actually the one where you had the Nine Inch Nails Ghosts track from the original demo version. You go down, and that's where everything starts unraveling. But it was like a literally incomprehensible series of deep feelings, and in the content that I make or that I try to educate about, I refer to this as like a mystical experience. It's a feeling that's so deep and so resonant that you're literally carried on it, like it's a wave that's picking you up and moving you. And in in Zen, they have the concept of koan, which is a puzzle that you can't exactly solve, but you also can't find any way to stop thinking about it or to set it down or set it aside. And the way Stanley Parable presented both that spooky feeling is another word that kind of goes along with that torrent of feeling we're trying to describe, like about the downstairs, the first time experiencing it particularly. But even later, even on repeat playing the game, especially in the real person ending, which I consider to be the credits end of the game, the actual final scene in it, um, the powerful mystical impact level that happens is such an interesting contrast to the kind of the scary overtones that are put in those trailer contents and in just certain tiny little parts of the game that feel like that. But the whole mix of the feeling that people were very puzzled by the game and wanted to kind of start asking questions, well, what exactly is the main puzzle in the game? That's what I started to do. I really started to ponder the koan. What is the actual meaning of the parable here? And what is. Did you ever find yourself asking, well, what exactly is fun? What does it mean? How does this game do what it does to us?
When you say that, do you mean like how does it like keep you entranced and like keep you going and playing?
Yeah, the nature of the puzzle was to see I'm having fun, or I'm really enjoying this game, but I don't exactly understand the feeling. It's like that puzzlement that it would inflict on people in varying degrees. It kind of leads to a question of, well, what does fun mean? What does any of this sensation that we're having mean, ultimately? People trying to figure out, can't comprehend this, I don't understand. And like the Raphael parody is that. It's like, I don't understand, it doesn't have enough emotion. But the funny thing about that is that it's almost infinitely emotive. It can't be quantified, in my opinion.
Yeah, for me, I think what really encaptured me into the Stanley Parable was um the narrator's different feelings to things versus how you felt, because the narrator has different emotions to what you might be feeling about something. So when you first play the game and uh you're told to go to a certain path, some people are feeling rebellious maybe at that moment. When they first play the game, it depends right on your emotion right then and there, because once you realize what this game can be, that's when you start looking at it in a different perspective. But when you first play the game, you could be tricked into thinking this is completely normal. Like if somebody sat you down, they told you that this was a normal game, you didn't know that, and you wanted to be like, okay, I'm going to trick this person who's showing me this game. I'm going to go to the right instead of the left door. And you go to the right door. And then you hear the narrator talk about it. that is what I think is so great, is that it can put you in that moment of pause where you're like, oh, wait a minute, I was not ready for that. I was not expecting him to actually have a reaction to it, like in that sort of way. And then when you go to the room after the hallway, I forget what the room is called, but when you stand there
The
and you take it
lounge.
all in, yeah, the lounge, when you take in the lounge and the narrator starts talking to you, and he's sort of just sitting there, and he's like because you sit there, and he makes fun of it, but he's like, oh, the lounge, it's beautiful, you get different sort of aspects. But if you stay there, like a person might stay there just to check in the lounge, and the narrator will be like, oh, it seems like you're really enjoying the lounge, but I would also like to continue my story. He'll give you different dialogue for how long you've been staying in there. I think that is a beautiful way to engross a person, because when you realize that the narrator is not just there to like just talk, he will be there to also antagonize you or give you different reactions. I think it makes a big impact to players. One thing I like about this game is one of my favorite endings is the one where you go into the red door, and when you get to the part with the staircase where you have the choice of either staying in the room with the beautiful colors and the beautiful music, and you could just relax with the narrator, when you go into the next room where he has the staircase and everything, that is a beautiful moment to me, because he hesitates. He's like, why are you doing this? We could have just stayed in that room. And when you start to go up the staircase, and when you jump off and you don't immediately die, and it it makes you have that choice. It makes you have that clarity of, okay, I can either go back, I can either restart the game manually, or I can continue down this path of jumping off the staircase to see what happens. And I really like that, because you'll have different reactions to it. And as you're slowly going back up the staircase and you're jumping down, you have the narrator gives you different emotions to it. And there are points where people will go back to the other room, and they will relax in that room, and the narrator will thank them for it. But then they go back to the staircase, and he will be worried about it. And that is a beautiful way to make a person think about it more. Think about why the narrator is like this. Think about how they feel on it, and wanting to explore the rest of the game.
Yeah, it's the exact mechanism here that is happening in the gameplay. I pondered it a lot because I pondered, how was this thought of? How was this concept constructed? And in thinking about that question, I started to see this kind of second person perspective feeling, which is basically like when you're peering out the window at what's out there, somehow you simultaneously suddenly are peering in from the outside, and you're seeing like you, or what's supposed to be you, from that weird narrator's perspective. I started to feel more and more like the game is about the narrator, the character of that person who is vexed and trapped in this difficult um, eternal space, and he can't figure out what's the meaning of looking back in at himself and not actually having any choices. And I actually developed that idea, but part of the reason I invited you in here is, like I said, there's no one else I've ever met who has the mastery of this game to the degree and the feeling level that I feel about it. I really haven't met anyone else but me and you who are at this level of puzzlement. Did you say you didn't speedrun any other games before speedrunning Stanley?
No, no, no. Um, when I started my Twitch, when I started live streaming, it was like 3 years ago, probably 3+ years ago. I didn't think about speedrunning; it wasn't a thing. I just played games I enjoyed, and then I started playing a fan game of another game. Real quick, the game is I Want to Be the Guy. There's a fan games of it. There's millions of fan games. So I started off small because I wasn't sure if I would like speedrunning. I wasn't sure if I could really do it. Like I wasn't sure how I felt. So I just picked a game that was under 10 minutes. You could easily master. Like you can figure out the tricks, you can figure out how to do it, but it takes a long time to master. So I speedran that for a bit, and then I finally decided, okay, I need to step it up. So what do I play next? What do I really enjoy? And I looked at the Stanley Parable, and at the time it was a completely different way to play it. There was no game time. It was only real time. The leaderboards were under like only, I think, under 20 like submissions. The category 21 ending category was not even done. Nobody had done the 21 ending category. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna try a 12 ending run. I'm gonna see how I feel about this. And so I did it, and I had fun with it. I was like, okay, this is cool. What can I learn from this? So I started learning the chair skips at the beginning of the run. I started learning what was the best route, and by, what really best route though is what you think is best. But for me, I pick a certain route because I like it, but also it helps in the RNG of hoping that you'll get short hallways or blue hallways depending on what you're doing. And I think that's really good. So I started playing that, and then I really liked it, and so that's something I still speedrun to this day. I really do enjoy speedrunning it. I find it fun. I know the game is not for everyone because of how it works, the nature of it. It might be slow to people. People might not like the idea of walking only and just listening to somebody talk. But for me, I really like it, and to speedrun it is fun to me because it is listening to somebody, like you said, it seems like trapped in some world while you're spectating it, but you're also interacting with it in some way. And I enjoy it because when you're going through it as quick as possible, you're just listening to the dialogue. And sometimes, people will come into the stream and they'll be like, oh, this is a cool game, I've never seen this before, or like, oh, this is I like this game, I'm really cool to see somebody speedrunning it. You have those different reactions, and I like that because you have different experiences. People who have seen this game before, really into it, who are like, oh, this is cool, I love this, or people who have never seen this game before and they're like, oh, this is interesting, this is new, I might have to check it out. I like the different contrast between the two, and I like just the game in general, and I like how it can be played.
Yeah, you get such a mix of different feelings toward the game from people who show up in a speedrun or participate at all in like a streamed type of content. Um, it's really interesting that the stream format kind of reflects something that's very similar to that mechanism that you feel when you're having that interaction with the narrator, with that person who seems trapped. But you have people who have never seen the game and they don't know, and then all of a sudden they're like bamboozled by the noise at the end of the confusion ending or something, and like they don't know the game's about to take a left turn. And then you get people who are like, "Oh, I'm interested in this. I've never seen this before, and I'm gonna go play it now." And people who don't understand what's about to happen with it because they just kind of wandered in on the speedrun aspect. It's it kind of like micro models that social structure between when you get into, I thought of this as the Stanley meta content mechanism, like when I would watch somebody who plays the game and stream that. And Davey Reedon actually did this in the beginner's guide. He did a stream and watched somebody's playthrough of the beginner's guide specifically to comment on their play, not on the beginner's guide itself. Did you ever watch that?
I did not know he did that. I'm gonna have to check that out. That is
Yeah,
really cool to hear.
I discovered it when he tweeted about the anniversary for the beginner's guide, and somebody posted it in the same thread where he was releasing some unreleased behind the scenes content from its development. But the whole the whole mechanism of that, of the interaction we are going to have here, where I'm playing the game and you're seeing my play of the game, or like I'm seeing somebody's play of some game, all of that is also gameplay, I started to realize. And I started to have feelings about the real meta meaning of the parable in the actual gameplay itself. Um, I was curious, did what got you into the idea of streaming or doing this kind of game interaction activity with people where there'd be a player and viewers, but they would be having an interaction about the togetherness part? What was there any inspiration point or like favorite streamer or person that puts you on this path?
Well, originally I did YouTube for a while. I liked making videos and stuff. I found it fun. But after a while, I lost that sort of feeling of making YouTube videos. Something about it was, like I feel like I couldn't do what I was trying to do. I couldn't like get on the level of like for being a YouTuber that I wanted to be. I wasn't very good at editing and stuff like that. My videos were very mediocre, which is just it's fine. It happens, That's of course that's going to be a thing that happens. Um, but after a while, I stopped doing it. I have all my videos privated and stuff. I have them archived for a reason. It's because I know I want to watch them someday again. I want to see, my improvements and in my future. Um, After a while, though, I stopped doing YouTube, and eventually I went to Twitch because around the time when Twitch was, I want to say at its peak, but when it was really good, um, I I started following smaller channels and stuff. I started seeing games that I liked, and I was like, you know what, I should give this a try. And I just started streaming one of my favorite games, and I'm continued to do so. And I just you know, I started streaming things I like, and then I started speedrunning things I liked, and I started doing more. And this pushed me to do things like pushed me to do different things as well. Interacting with people, making new friends off of Twitch and stuff. That was a fun thing. I really liked doing that. Um, Experimental streams, like doing karaoke or playing just a game I've never played before, or doing like playing something people wouldn't expect. Um, that was really fun for me. I like doing this, and for me, Twitch, I don't expect it to go. I don't expect it to be this big thing. Like I don't expect to get a big community or anything. That's not really what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is I like my small sort of people who watch the streams every now and then, and I like entertaining people. One of my things is I like entertaining people. I like putting a smile on their face, and you know, there are so many different Twitch creators out there that you could watch a bunch of them, and you can only get certain reactions from certain of them. Sometimes you'll like a streamer, sometimes you won't, and for me, I like entertaining, so I play a variety of games because I like having my own little diversity, and every now and then I'll play the Stanley Parable. I'll speed run it, or I'll play something else, speed run it, or I'll go back to a game I really like just to play it for fun. But I really like going out there and just interacting with people, and I like entertaining in a good way.
Yeah, when you actually get in there and start seeing what it is like to kind of instruct people on something that you really, really love and really enjoy, and get to meet other people who end up there, who come to that vibe, it's. I feel like that's a main piece of what the mechanics of Stanley Parable were putting across, but we just didn't really have much experience with that kind of interaction, that type of social and creative transaction, because a game is somebody's art. It's an incredibly intricate creation. I listened to a podcast with Davey on it when the full version came out, like early in its life cycle, and he told the story of how the game was originally made. And at the beginning, it was just him scribbling furiously on a notepad on a park bench before he brought anyone else in. And I thought about that. That really affected me when he said that, because I thought of the idea of creating instructions and creating a process for players to follow if they cared to actually look, if they wanted to show up and play the game the way it was meant to be, to to give them an experience that couldn't be found in any other way except for that instruction path and sequence of ways of navigating an interesting place, a place that which seems as much like a trap as it seems like an infinite paradox of creativity. And it's like the narrator, if you study his moods, like you were saying, he kind of deteriorates into this recursive creativity place where he's simultaneously trapped but also like completely enthralled with the greatness of it and the amazingness of it. Like when he's happy to blow you up, that's one of the endings that it has the most amusement, because he's going back and forth between the extremes of like loneliness and despair and vengefulness, and he's just presenting this incredibly interesting human, who at the same time creates a permanent, like, indomitable rebuttal to anybody saying that you're accessing the human being that made the game when you go in and have that game experience. It's actually the opposite. The artist is absent. They're giving you an experience with yourself. They're bringing you closer and closer together with yourself. They say, think of a tree. You think of the tree that you have seen, not the one they've seen. So it's an interaction with yourself, and the artist is absent. But nonetheless, when we come here on Twitch to celebrate a game, to just live in it, to inhabit it, and to share the feelings we have of gratitude and of awe for somebody's creation, and the care and dedication and passion, and sometimes even like the feeling of a creativity illness, it grabs you and you cannot stop creating the thing until you feel like you've gotten it out into a physical place where it can be seen and experienced, even if not many people come and find it. You're satisfied by making it be, not by getting others to see it. It's because they have to actually look and want to see it in order to see it. All you need to do is create the thing that's in your heart. And I think that's what Twitch is actually about. When we come here and celebrate and speedrun a game with such care and dedication to just spend as much time as it takes in the game space to gain a mastery, I felt like the Stanley Parable just led inevitably to that conclusion, to the whole idea of sharing what you love and celebrating it, and working the whole puzzle all the way out, even though you didn't have to. You wanted to spend the time exploring all of its intricacies.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. With different games, you can play. You could play games in so many different ways. You can do it delicately. You can do it fast. You can do it slow. You can do it ambitious. You could do it recklessly. There's so many ways you could play different games, and, I really like that because whenever whenever I play a new game, for fun on Twitch, maybe I always like to explore a bit because I always find it fun. I always find it interesting to see if I can find maybe some details or maybe something like in the game, like maybe just some items even. Like I like exploring the landmarks though and different things like that. Um, and the reactions you get when people know when people know a game very well, and so you play it for the first time and you're not sure what to expect, and when people are waiting for your reaction. One of my favorite moments, I think, is when I played Undertale for the first time. I never played it. Well, no, that's not true. I played it for YouTube, but I lost my save. It was a neutral run. I hadn't played it in many years after that, and I never thought I was going to play it again. I was like, the game is just, I know how the game works, but that's not true at all. The game, it was not how I expected it to be when I played it again. What I did was I did a genocide run first, and then I did true pacifist run first. The reason I did this was because genocide seemed interesting to me, and I wasn't sure what to expect. And when I played it, I had many reactions to it, and I really had fun with it. And going to True Pacifist, I had a lot more reactions to it. I had a lot more fun with it as well because there was a contrast between the two routes and how they worked, and the game's like what you expect versus what you receive. There's so many different things that can happen in the games that do happen, and I liked how it went. I liked how it worked. Between the contrast of you kill every enemy versus you mercy every enemy. You
Yeah.
let them live. I enjoyed that because it was something so new to me that I hadn't seen it fully fleshed out. It worked perfectly. I think it worked greatly. Undertale is one of my favorite games now because of how it worked, and I like the way it was designed. It seems simple, but for how the game is, it's really not. The game is so much more than what it gives out, and that's the same way with the Stanley Parable. The game seems so simple. It seems so small. It's like it's something you could easily miss when you're browsing the Steam store. But if you give it a chance, if you look at it, if you look it up, if you play it, and you discover what we discovered, or you discover it on your own, you see how the Stanley Parable unfolds, how the game works, how the game can can give you these different feelings, how it can persuade you with different emotions and all that. I think it is perfect and beautiful the way it works. It captures many different feelings into one. And when you're done with it for your first time playing it, when you're done, you sit there and you're marveled at what you just played, because now you're thinking about what can I do next? What's the next step? What did I miss? I have to go back. I have to look this up. Maybe there's something I missed. You start looking it up. You start seeing what the creators are up to. You start seeing different things about it, and that is a beautiful thing to me.
Yeah, it really was a beautiful experience that ultimately led to something I would come around to in like education and mysticism types of thoughts that came from listening to Alan Watts. But there's a Terence McKenna quote that says, "The main thing to understand is that we are imprisoned in some kind of work of art."
I would agree with that.
Stanley Parable and Beginner's Guide actually held up this thought in a way that very, very interestingly explored the idea of a prison or a trap that is entertaining and vexing and everything all at once. I've got another quote that I put beside this one. I don't know who it's from, but it says, "Only those who have crossed the edge know exactly where to find it." And one of the Alan Watts talks that I've studied a lot, he says a advice that says, if you get the message, then you need to hang up the phone, which is interesting to me when I came across a lot of his lectures because they seem to directly speak to the exact same thing that the Stanley Parable and Beginner's Guide speak to. Um, I found it interesting that hanging up the phone and defying the phone in the actual credits path in Stanley Parable, the real person one, is that hanging up the phone is symbolized here because you subvert the phone instead of answering it. And I noticed the events of this path revealed that people make 8 choices a day, and it then asks you to consider, well, how many choices are you making? And the kind of the trap design of the game is holding that up constantly. It's asking you, well, are you making a choice? How do you make a choice? It's kind of goading you about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the great things about it too is whenever you restart the game or the game restarts, it always hits you with like this is the end, this isn't the end, or like the different sort of like run on words it gives you when you're loading into the next
Yep.
area. Um, I think that also conveys your choice because there are times in the game when you think you're having a choice, like going back to whenever you go through the boss's office, you do the game normally, and then instead of turning off the power, you turn it on, and the narrator laughs and he says, "Do you really have a choice in this? Do you really think that you could make a decision? Do you think that this game can be won, can be beaten?" And it really, when most people see that, they're shocked because they weren't expecting the narrator to basically call you out and say like, "You don't get power. You get a punishment for thinking you get power."
Yes, precisely. As I was pondering what's the actual meaning, what's the real message here of the narrator character, why is he so vexed, why is he so furious, um, I started to notice that the game was basically doing to you this. It would be like if you fell into the pit at the beginning of Mario 1-1, the game just stopped, nothing happened, and you were forced to reset the game to continue. And the end of a lot of Nintendo games, actually, and like Mario 64, to name another one, comes to a point where the game has stopped. There's no further input possible. It's the end. It's the final screen. There's no more interaction except to turn the game off and start it again. Stanley Parable did something so remarkable with that exact mechanism to ultimately get you to ponder your lack of power, or, on the paradoxical sense, your total and complete power to invent any kind of choice you want to. And the beginner's guide was actually holding up that same idea, but like from the opposite perspective point, from the perspective of a real person who was kind of being upset at their audience not understanding and not wanting to spend the time in the game that it would take to understand the puzzle and to really get the nuance and celebrate that nuance.
Uh, it. I think I think one of the things that makes it so replayable is the constant conversations with the narrator or the differences in the hallways and stuff like that. And like you said, if you played a Mario game where as soon as you die, the game just boots you out and it says, "Okay, restart it." It would catch you off guard. But with the Stanley Parable, if it did that, you would think it would be a part of the game. You would think right then and there, like say for example, your computer crashed or something. I've seen a review on Steam where it says my computer blue screen, and I thought it was a part of the game. And when I saw that, I believe that person meant that because when you play the game, and like let's say you do like 5 or 6 endings. At that point, if the game blue screened, you would legitimately for like at least a solid few seconds believe that this was a part of the game. That the game it has a random element where the game will pretend to blue screen before the narrator comes in and he says something like, "What happened? Like, why did the game stop?" and something like that. I believe that person really thought for a second that the narrator would come back in and say something about the blue screen. And when they didn't, they were just surprised that the computer had crashed. I think that's beautiful um, to look at. That's somebody's perspective. That somebody got tricked and really thought that this was a part of the game. And and like you said with Mario 64 or any Mario game in general, whenever like Super Mario Galaxy, you collect all the stars. What do you do next? Well, you restart the game. You start a new file and you play through the game again. Uh, that's really about it. But with the Stanley Parable, it will continue to reset no matter what. There is no stopping it. It
Yeah,
will continue to reset every single time you do an ending or you manually do it. It will not stop.
yeah.
And that is a good way of keeping the player going and keeping them, it's just keeping it going forever, basically.
Yeah, that mechanism actually describes the meaning of the game, to say the end is never the end every time you're starting. And when the Steam description says you will have a choice and you will have no choice and the game will end and the game will never end, it's literally holding up the game mechanism of what is actually referred to as a koan in Zen. If you examine the game in its narrative math, you discover there's 7 decisions that describe the significant endings, but there's actually one more when you discover the sudden leaving out of the boss area to go to the silent escape pod. And after I went all the way down into this rectangle, the the 8-pointed rectangle, the whole idea of the choices. I got a sensation of having solved the 8 choices puzzle, or the solution, if you will, in the koan, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about it here.
Which part of it exactly? Uh,
Well, so I wrote down the math of the 7 endings that you can find. The game's basically saying something really interesting to you. It's saying you have to remain touchable, but you have to also remain untouchable. It basically says, here's all these things you could do, but you could actually keep going. Once you start playing, you can actually never ever leave, except if you decide just to not play for 5 years. It's like illustrating that to you with every single step along the way. And what I noticed about the 7 choices, I had to use a little bit of visual math to figure this out. There's a lot of choices Stanley has that actually just lead to the same thing. So I had to analyze what are the choices that come to actual differences, not just the same endpoint. Um, so I wanted to see what are the 8 choices this person has to make in order to be a real person. I couldn't count any actions that equate to backtracking or changing your choice later. We're just doing the math of what are the available endpoints that actually exist. Also, I had to discard any choice that simply amounts to stopping where you are forever, which the game does actually instruct you to do at multiple points, but it doesn't qualify as one of the choices that goes onward and ends somewhere. It's just an example of stop there, never leave, be there for eternity, which is what you see at actually the end of the end credits. It's just Stanley stopped there, never doing anything ever again. So I wrote down one of the 7 and analyzed it, but realizing that sudden leaving was the 8th choice, I started to wonder what is the alternative to the sudden leaving. And I had to chew on that question for quite a long time before I actually got to the full realization of the puzzle. I realized it was not possible to make a 100% complete list because it would be self-recursive. To have any list, you have to select and unselect anything not being written down, but still is identical to the ones that are written down. So the ones that were listed had some key differentiator, canceling the need to actually call out all the ones that were the same thing as it. But the unknown alternative to the sudden leaving, the escape pod, seemed to be just literally the total combination of every choice that resulted in being trapped or eternally standing still. They're like nothing choices where you just stay. Either you're leaving where you are or else you're just staying there, were the 2 possible options at any given point. And that throws me all the way back to the very beginning of the game where he's saying begin the game again, and you start. You are necessarily starting there because you chose to go ahead and move on and keep playing instead of standing still for eternity. And I think that's what the game was ultimately saying about the haunted state of the narrator, was to say you can go on and on as long as you want. You could play this game every day for the rest of your life, or you could literally never play it again. It was just constantly bringing forward all the feelings about that liminal feeling of having reached the limit of something, escaped the limit, and then being left with that weird feeling like when I first fell out of the control room, the walkway room for the first time, and realized that there was no dialogue and I probably wasn't supposed to be able to fall there, but it was nonetheless an ending. There was just nothing else for me to do except wander the darkness or restart the game again. Just any number of those little experiences that any given player could have are parts of that 8th choice of places that you stop and never left. And those little eternal ending places that you could go and visit, but you had to actually decide to leave. Like in the Beginner's Guide 2 door puzzle, you had to choose to move on, but you didn't have to. Nothing would force you to do that.
um Talking about standing still and stuff like that, and the endings, the ending at the very beginning of the game, which you could get immediately without even knowing it, is if you just close the door in Stanley's office, uh and basically you just stand there and wait, and that counts as an ending. While the other ones that you said, you could stand there but doesn't count as ending. This is one of the only, I think, possibilities where you standing still counts as an ending, and just will restart the game, of course, but it is something to think about. Where Stanley, or as the narrator says, Stanley is afraid to go to the boss's office, so he just stands there for eternity. It seems just stands there, does nothing, and the game restarts. But in that moment, if a player were to have only that ending and then quit the game, that's what they would be left with. A question of what would happen if I did leave the office? What would happen if I did go to the boss's office? And so on and so on.
Yep, it's a game of questions, and it starts you right there with saying, if Stanley just walked outside the door and instantly won the game, well, that wouldn't be a very good story. It's constantly asking that question and saying, so what exactly is it that makes Stanley feel like his life is worth living? And it goes to such an interesting way of interacting with you to think about those questions. It's really impossible to convey it in commentary feedback, but it feels like a Zen place, like it's a real place that exists, and that's why I feel like the myth of the Ultra Deluxe version is like such a rich headspace, because we're all just sitting here like it'll never come out. It'll just keep getting different and different and different, and then someday we're gonna play some version of the Stanley Parable that has like 17 layers and 19 dimensions, and we're not even gonna understand what happened. We're gonna be transported into a whole new plane of existence playing that version of the game.
I think it's very interesting because they're adding new endings and stuff, and that's not a bad thing to me, but I'm curious as to what we will expect, because while we're stuck with these 21 endings, technically I would say 20, because the whiteboard ending is interesting, and well, actually 19 at that point, because then the cheating ending. But those those 19 endings are so different. Or I guess it's not even 19. It's like you, because you have the endings where the game restarts. No matter what, gonna restart. It will happen. But then you have the endings where you have to manually do it. And one of those endings that is basically going to restart no matter what is also forcing you to restart is the escape, the pretend escape, like going through and looking at looking at the game's history sort of room. I don't remember the exact ending's name, but you know the one I'm
Yeah.
talking about. Where you, like, before you go into the room where you can press all the buttons, go up the elevator again, and you get to the control point where you could turn on the machine or turn it off. If you go to the escape part and you go through the entire process, first of all, the female narrator is such a wild card, because right when you think Stanley's gonna die, you think, okay, this is the ending. The game throws you a curveball and it says, okay, here's a new narrator, by the way, but also, what if we showed you something you weren't expecting? And in a normal game, you would never see this. It would be like either an Easter egg to find a room like this, or you would have to just go to like the developer's website or something, or like just look up like them talking about it, like with Valve and stuff, where they have their own sort of community. Like they talk about the games and stuff. You press the speech bubbles and they talk about the sort of things. In this game, instead, it is its own ending where, yeah, at first you think Stanley's gonna die. It tricks you. You go through the process of looking at all of the different things they went through, the development, the ideas, the stuff like that, like the screenshots on the game being greenlit, the ending with the war that was cut out, the different doors, buttons, sort of stuff like that. The narrator just talking, uh, that one room, it's dark and stuff, and then you finally leave and you see the Stanley Parable and you see the switch, and the woman, she starts saying like, look at them. They continue to fight. They continue to do all this. What happens if it just stops and then you flick the switch, and next you're transported back to the same beginning you had before, and you're going slowly into the crusher, and she's telling you there is no way to end the game. The only way to end it is to completely stop playing. You just have to quit the program, stop playing. And when Stanley gets crushed, you're left with this, you're left in blackness, dark, nothing. No one will come unless you restart the game or you close the game. And that is beautiful because it tells you that yes, you've had to manually restart the game for certain endings, but this ending is very specific. It is your choice. It is specifically your choice to continue playing or to stop playing.
Yeah,
And most
that
people
ending's
will
so
continue
good at
playing.
that.
Yeah.
It's so powerful that the game explores how many different ways could a player be tricked, and then have to think about what do they have to decide to do. What does their choice need to be in order for any game to happen at all? When I was thinking about Davey scribbling the narrations on the notepad, I was thinking about this. He reached a point in the first version of the game, before it was playable, that um, he had to get out of the way of the player's decision and allow the player playing the game to create their experience of how the parable was going to speak to them. And he had to figure out a way to make the game where it would entirely empower a player, while also exploring that question of how many different ways could we trick the player into that experience where they're feeling the feeling of their choice, of their own path through a given space and a given experience. And he got to a point where he could no longer tell the story without it being told in a way that was revealed by the person's individual choice of what to do at any given moment. And so the game just, I thought of it like a multiplying organism at that point. The game just kept duplicating and duplicating and duplicating and splitting apart into another two. Every single time he encountered another way that he could empower the player and remove himself out of the way of seeing what was the player going to do with any given situation. He had to he couldn't make the game in such a way that the player's choice was taken away or wasn't invoked. He had to, in order to tell the Stanley Parable's narrative correctly, he had to make it possible for the player's own decision to be the thing in the very center, no matter what. And so that created a very interesting gravitational kind of object that it feels like to walk through the Stanley Parable and be subjected to that type of questioning. And it's this energy of the game that I feel that qualifies it as a Zen koan, where it kind of leads you along a path, suddenly tricks you, and then in that moment, in that motion from when the map flips to the right side up and you see it and you feel that feeling of your own choice, that's what Zen and Zen teacher koans are supposed to do. They're supposed to bamboozle somebody who's looking for something into realizing the answer, into kind of having that mystical feeling suddenly revealed to them, and they realize they already know, and they never didn't know, and the question itself is just kind of a funny, amusing thing that leads them along a path. It does this in such a deep and thorough way that I would say my discovery of Zen as an educational mechanism, I think, is 100% attributable to Davey and his design of this game.
What one of the key examples to leading people on and like thinking that they're doing something is when you get to the red and blue doors, because those two endings, you don't get to them in the normal way. How, like, for people, when they start going on the conveyor, when you get into the mailroom and stuff, and they go up, people will look around, they look down, and they think they're gonna be rebellious, and they are rebellious. They jump down. The narrator's like, "Why would you do that? I'm in the middle of speaking to you. Why would you do this to me? Like, I'm trying to tell you how things can work. I'm trying to show you something." But in that moment, a person thinks that, oh, okay, I got the narrator now, like this is I'm shaping the story into my own way, and then they get to the doors and stuff, and they pick the blue door, and they're still messing with the narrator and stuff. But in that moment, the game instantly tricks the person into thinking
Yeah.
that they had a choice, when in reality it was set up to either to basically get the narrator in a way where he is either going to be sad or he is going to question your own, like, why you're doing this. Because if you go through the red door, like we discussed earlier, you go into the staircase, Stanley dies, and he wants you to stay in the room. You don't. You kill yourself. He knows it's gonna restart. The game restarts. That's it. And it is a very questionable ending. And if you go through the blue door, you go through a series of events where the narrator is asking you, "What would have made this better for you? What would have made this better?" But the question, but that is all a trick in itself, because when you get to the very end of it, he's basically just asking, "What were you looking for exactly? What did you think you were going to find when you got to the very end?" Because there was no real answer. You just kind of got here. Are you satisfied? Are you happy? I mean, he doesn't know. He can't tell you how you feel. Only you can figure that out. And that's the perfect way to capture somebody thinking that they have tricked the narrator into getting themselves tricked into something way more crazy than they realized was going to happen.
Yeah, that's the ultimate impact. It says to you at every turn, only you can figure out what this means. Only you can determine this relevance. I can't tell you that. I can't. And Davey had to get out of the player's way to be able to say that to them with the meaning of the parable. It was like he discovered a parable that was larger than any person's possible ego, and in Zen fashion, proceeded to create a series of paths which would just, instead of leading the person to the answer to the question, it leads them to the question itself, of the fact that there's no ending. In that stream of the beginner's guide that Davey did, there was one of the chat that he read out during the stream said, "Did you happen to see whether they took the specific choices during the dialogue to get the good ending?" And I thought this was hilarious because he addressed this comment in Reddit and he said, "No, I didn't actually see what they did." And the reason why it's funny is because there is no ending. So the the viewers asking that question, understanding that there's no ending, and Davey's answering it in the same way, understanding there's no ending, while somebody else watching this, who has never seen the beginner's guide, wouldn't understand that there was no ending and that that question had a humorous impact.
I think that's a beautiful way of looking at it too, because you whenever you see the games for the first time, whether it's the Stanley Parable or the Beginner's Guide, it will take you on a roller coaster you're not expecting. And I feel like there are two different contrasts between the games, where the Stanley Parable has you questioning a lot of things, while the Beginner's Guide has you questioning a specific thing. But because of how wide, like how open it is, no matter what you think of it, it is still a roller coaster for anybody. And my favorite part is because if somebody who's, let's say for example, somebody who's seen the Stanley Parable, they know exactly how the game works. Multiple endings, it is different, it messes with your mind, there's different choices, there's not choices, all that stuff. They know it well, but they've never seen the Beginner's Guide. You sit them down, you make them play that, and you tell them, oh, by the way, this is from the same guy who made the Stanley Parable. They're going to think they have an understanding of this, and by the end of the game, when they go through the emotions of Davy, they go through the emotions of the different games, they go through the emotions of the questions, the light post, everything. By the end of it, you could ask them, how was this the same as the Stanley Parable? And most likely, or more often than not, they will say no, it is not, but it conveys something sort of like it. I feel like is the best way you could get an answer for somebody who knows the Stanley Parable but doesn't know the Beginner's Guide.
Yeah, precisely, because the beginner's guide was presenting kind of a polarity inverse, like an upside down picture of the same question in Stanley Parable, by saying, well, here's a bunch of things you might do and you might decide. Here's some decisions you might make. The beginner's guide said, here's a whole bunch of decisions you can't make, because you can only be you. You have to find out what that is. And Davey, is the narrator in that game, is literally vexed, and he's asking Coda, how did you get the wholeness? How did you begin? He's literally asking, how did you get this thing I never had? I don't know how, and I want to know, how do you do this?
Um, the thing with the question is that there is no real answer, and there's certainly not an answer that the player can give, because when you're playing that game, and unlike the Stanley Parable, you're not Stanley. There's not a set character you play as in the Beginner's Guide. You play as yourself basically. It's as if you're watching a movie, and instead of watching the movie from like like how it's supposed to be, you watch the movie, the characters talk and stuff. Instead, you put on the developer's commentary, and Davey is like, "Hi, I'm Davey. This is I know this person. I'm going to show you through their games, and I want you to interpret it while I also tell you a bit of things." You put on the developer's commentary, and you went through the movie the first time like that. It would leave you in an interesting state where you know things, but you also don't know things, and you think you understand things, but you don't understand things, and it all builds up into the ending where Davey finally leaves you, and you just end the game, and you're sitting there wondering, why did all of this happen? What was Davey's choices? What did he do? Why did he show me this? Like, as a person, why was I shown this?
Yes, that's what it felt like. It felt like all the Coda games were games about somebody, a real person. And the narrator games are all about somebody who's not real, because he's having to constantly come up with, well, how do you be a real person? What does that mean? And he's stuck in this not real place. And all the games about the narrator are actually about the narrator, the ghost of that person, not the actual player of the game or Stanley. Like, there is no Stanley. But in Beginner's Guide, you're like, well, who am I? And who exactly is Coda? And you're left with that unanswerable question. Like, I call this the unsolvable or undefeatable puzzle koan. There's just no solution. There's no way to answer it.
Which is a nice contrast to the puzzle in the Beginner's Guide, which can be solved many times throughout the game.
Yeah, that puzzle is such an interesting way to set up a floor on which to state the final question, the final conclusion, which is unsolvable, which is an infinite paradox where you're floating up above the maze.
Yeah, the my favorite part of the Beginner's Guide is that in the Stanley Parable, the game is set in a way where you have no control over the narrator. And while you don't have control over Davy, Davy is in control of the games you're playing. And throughout the entire game, when you find out that he's been editing them, and at the end of the game, when he just edits the final level because it is unbeatable, I like the message because it shows that you're not supposed to be doing this. We're not supposed to even be here. We're not supposed to be playing this. You're not supposed to be doing this, Davy. And when Davy gets all the messages, and when you read all the messages, you're shocked, but Davy is in a state of complete despair. and you weren't expecting it. With how he's been, with at the beginning of the game, he's cheery. He's ready to show you these games from Coda, that by the end of it, you see the progression of him slowly going into a state of depression, in a state of like, this is my fault. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done this. Why did I do this? What was I trying to prove? And even by the end of it, Davey doesn't have an answer. When you think he has an answer, he sounds so uncertain that you don't believe his answer. You can't believe his answer. It is not the true answer. Davey does not know why he did these things, and that is something he has to live with and something he has to just ponder about on his own. And you're left with that at the very end. You finish it, and you're just left to sit there and wondering if Davey will be okay. What's Coda up to? What did the games mean? What was Coda's thinking? Just a bunch of things you can't answer though, because you don't know Coda. You don't know Davey. You only know what you've been shown.
Yeah, and that's the thing, he almost gets you to be upset that there was a whole bunch of puzzles and places to explore in these games that Davey basically just disabled and wouldn't even let you see. There's a couple points where you do actually have a choice to turn around and explore something he skips you past, and you can do that. He does comment on it, I think, only in the Escape from Whisper level, but he rarely ever says anything about you looking around something and makes fun of you for looking for secrets that aren't there. But you he makes you frustrated at the end that he did a bunch of changes to basically block you from fully exploring and understanding the meaning of those experiences, and you're left wondering, so what did Coda actually mean? And you have to ponder that question from a point of being completely prevented from going there and exploring it, where Coda would have been saying, come in here, come into this place that I designed, and see this, see what it is to be here and to feel this and to experience this. And the lamppost, that's what it means. It means the failure to actually go all the way in and hold the space for somebody's art, what they made, and understand what the art is saying. Not make a judgment about the person, but to understand what it is that's being said. What's the channel of reality that's being found? He perfectly walked you up to that cliff edge in front of an infinite chasm and just left. It just left you standing there. You had no idea how to get back away from it, but you just definitely weren't going to jump in.
Yeah, with the way the game is, you go through these levels thinking not much of it until the lampposts start coming in, and then when the lampposts start coming in, you get the different themes of the game. And with what Davey says, he thinks that like Coda had depression or something, or Coda was in a state of like he thinks he's a failure, and then you find out that that isn't really the case. But maybe Davey's the one who's putting his emotions into something he shouldn't be, because he didn't make them to begin with. All he did was edit them. um it's really interesting because it, you can't explain it, and you don't know why he did it. But when you see it, you're trying to figure out what's wrong with Davy, and like, why did Coda make such weird things? But that's just what Coda did. It seems Coda just liked making weird things, and Davy saw them in a way Coda didn't, and that's where the disagreement came in. That's where their friendship went away, and that's where Davy realizes he messed up, and that's it. That's just it.
Yeah, it's really when Davey commented on the game's anniversary. It was back in October, beginning of October. Um, he posted a title card that was going to show before the game as an epigraph, and I think it kind of gives away or spoils the secret, which is like a very zen thing to do, to like give the whole thing away right at the very beginning, and then when you get to the end, they fool you and be like, surprised that the meaning was right there. It was the first thing we said to you. It was a quote that says, "There will come a time when you believe everything is finished, and that will be the beginning."
Hmm. I think that works very well though with the beginner's guide. I understand why he didn't put it in, but I think it leaves more to the mind that it was left out, because when you see people playing the game for the first time and you see people get emotional and stuff, I like that because it shows that this impacted them in a way you didn't expect, and it made them think about something else in their life that isn't exactly like the Coda and Davy situation, but it makes them think about something in their life that is similar to it, but not exactly on par with it. And it goes back to the Stanley Parable, because there are some things that leave you questioning stuff, like the beginner's guide does, and it makes you think about your own life, or like the choices you made, or the things happening in your life right now that make you think that far about it and make you think so much about it that some things can't be answered, some things can be answered, but they're all on you and your own mind and what you think is right, what you think is bad, and just the certain aspects of it all.
Yeah, I would say that sums up the topic that we were trying to cover. I think we've fully explored what is the meaning of parable game enjoyment. Is gameplay that puts you in that liminal location where you are seeing that you are the person who's deciding and that you have to actually do something. If you, to do anything, you have to step out of where you are right now and go to the next place and go somewhere and visit the lounge. And I've spent thousands and thousands of hours admiring the lounge. In fact, I'm still doing so right now. But the whole thing of it is that that's what parable enjoyment is. That's what going all the way into something and exploring it. What does it mean to you, and what action does it necessitate out of you? I think that's the act of doing our creativity and exploring these liminal spaces that we contain. Where just when we think we know what it is, that's when you're at the beginning. You're at that point where you're like, okay, so now I need to actually figure this out. Now that I can see the whole picture. Oh, now I see why all these other things happen. So what am I supposed to do about that now? It's such a powerful place to arrive at when you get all the way into parable game enjoyment, to understand the creative aspect of it, and you're left like, I need to tell somebody, I need to share this with people. I did nothing but try to share the Stanley Parable with everybody that I interacted with, pretty much nonstop. I still haven't stopped. That's why I'm here building content about it.
I absolutely agree. I've had a few friends. I've even shown my sister the Stanley Parable because their reactions to it are what amaze me. Because some people interpret things differently. For the most part, though, when they first see it, they're just like, "Whoa, that was weird. I wasn't expecting that." But when I asked them how it made them feel, their usual, like my sister's response was, I showed her well, she was just playing it for the first time. She was doing different types of endings before she stopped playing. She got to the downstairs ending, and we just watched it in silence. I didn't say anything. I watched her. I watched her reactions, her facial expressions, and by the end of it, I asked her how she felt, and she was just like, "I don't know how to feel, but I feel like I don't feel okay with how it went." And I was like, "Okay, that's a different way to interpret things. You're not okay with how the ending was, but why is that?" And she just said, "I'm not sure,
You
but
don't know.
I didn't I just didn't feel good about it. It didn't feel right with me." And that's a way different way to interpret it than how other people might interpret that ending.
I think that's the main mechanism of a parable's game impact. Is for some people, it's going to just completely upset them, and what's the word I'm looking for? It will completely disrupt them, or leave them feeling completely uncomfortable. And then for the other type of player, for another kind of player who's quite obtuse, a person like me, um, that person is delighted, incredibly delighted, by being walked up to that point of total perplexity and being like, well, there's like a 1,000 sided object I can study here. This is amazing.
Yeah, uh, like going to the ending where you unplug the telephone and that starts the chain of events of what people might perceive as the real ending
Yep.
because the credits and everything. That ending is amazing because when you first get to the telephone, you do it, you go through the whole thing of like Stanley, has a family, but he doesn't. The narrator just wants to show you that this is Stanley's life. He is basically pathetic, and it is sad that he's wasting away his life in this room pressing buttons. So when you find out you can unplug the phone, or if you do it by like on your first, like you go back into the room and you're like, I wonder if I can unplug the phone. I can see it there, I can see the wire, the plug, I can see it, and you unplug it, and you go through the motion of the movie where it's telling you what about choices. The game is deteriorating, the narrator sends you back, and then you have that choice again. You're back to the very choice at the beginning of the game. What are you going to do? Are you going to go to the left? Are you going to listen to the narrator finally? Or are you going to go to the right? Are you still going to disobey the narrator? And in that moment, whatever you choose doesn't matter because you have already deteriorated the game. Because when you go to the left, you follow the narrator. You get to the point where you have to say Night Shark 117, I think it was. That's the password. But for people, they think they have to do it. So people in the game do it. They say it out loud,
Try to do
like
it.
a streamer or a YouTuber. They say
Yep.
it out loud, and then nothing happens. And the narrator comments on not
Doesn't matter.
you, not you as the person, but Stanley. And that is something incredible too, because you forget that maybe you're playing as Stanley. You just keep hearing Stanley. You hear the word Stanley so much that at that point it just goes into your mind that I am Stanley. That when you hear the narrator say Stanley breathed in, he's gonna say it. So then you say it and nothing happens. You get that motion of, oh, wait a minute, that's right, I'm not Stanley. This is the character we're playing as. The character is Stanley, but he doesn't talk. A silent protagonist. So the narrator gets upset. Then the game restarts again, and you're back at the choice. You're back at the what would you do? Would you go left or right? So left didn't work, following the narrator didn't work. So what happens if I go to the right? And it deteriorates the game even more. And the narrator gets so mad that he restarts the game and he shuts it down. And when he gets rebooted, he's like, why am I here with you? Why? Like, I don't want to be here with you. You ruined everything. And then the final reset happens, and you see Stanley just standing there, and you see the narrator slowly start to become depressed because Stanley's not doing anything. There's a sense where you realize that the narrator is so trapped in this game and is so trapped in this world that Stanley is the only person he can talk to. That when Stanley does absolutely nothing, it affects him so much that he doesn't want to cause harm to Stanley at that point. He just wants him to walk. He doesn't care what Stanley does. He
Yeah.
can walk into the wall for all he cares. But as long as Stanley walks, does anything, it will please the narrator. It'll make him feel better.
Yeah, there's some kind of really incredible cosmic truth inside of that that is the center of everything I try to convey in education gameplay content, which is if I can't see you, then I'm hidden. If you're hidden, then I completely disappear. If you are seen, though, then I'm going to come into being. Like, I can't be me or perceive me or even exist at all unless there's someone else in there doing some kind of action that can bounce off of me and can show me that I'm here. And the narrator is like in this eternal vexation of not having somebody to bounce off of, basically. And that ending, it teaches you the meaning of that others, if they aren't there, if you're not involving others in the process of your art, then it's like it doesn't even exist. And it's a really a maddening place to be stuck there. I feel like a lot of creatives end up making content like that because they spent time in that liminal place where you're kind of upset and you're very disturbed about it, and you eventually you get through it, but like it's kind of like a symbol of our dark place that I think we would all fall to every now and then, and struggle to navigate it.
Funny thing about that, I think that works really well, is that while, like you said, it's like the art, like the narrator doesn't involve Stanley, he only involves him into the parts that Stanley matters, but not everything as a whole. It's like the opposite of the beginner's guide, where Davey thinks he is so involved, it completely ruins the point of Coda's work.
Yeah.
And I think that's truly a miraculous thing to think about, because like you said, by the end of it, all the narrator wants is for Stanley to do something. But at the end of the beginner's guide, Davy, all he wants is to wish he never did anything to begin with.
Yeah, to be on the complete opposite of that and say, I want not to have happened this thing that happened. Because it's the question of, well, what are you going to do to know somebody's art, to go in and actually see the point of what they did and what they made. And to a certain extent, it's saying you can't actually understand it, but you can understand your contextualized help and the way it lifted you up and shined a light into your darker space. I think that's the value of it, to realize if you're projecting those feelings like it's somebody else's responsibility. No, you have to realize that you are the person who's going to find what light shines into the space you're trying to see it to. And you can't hold somebody else responsible for what you're going to see. You have to realize that it's up to you, and your actions are going to be one thing or the other. They're going to be modifying and overlooking and stepping past somebody's creation and their voice, or to actually hear them and see people and understand that you can't understand yourself unless you take that decision to really see others and to, instead of modify what they do, really try to be with them and understand it and actually enter their game and be part of it.
Yeah, it's such a big thing, because like with artists, from what I see, artists they 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 usually make something and they're really proud of it. They think it's really nice, but when they publish it, when they show it to people, they're like, "Oh, this is garbage." But sometimes people interpret things differently. So when they see it, they think, "Wow, this is amazing. I really love this art." Or they're like, or if an artist thinks his art, their art is really good, and they love what they've made, they see this person sees it, and they're like, "Wow, this is terrible. I don't like what's happening here. This doesn't make any sense. It doesn't work." People interpret things differently, and so sometimes as an artist, somebody viewing it, you can either completely demolish somebody with just a simple sentence of saying, "I don't like this because I don't understand," or you can make them feel better by saying, "I don't understand it but I really like it," or you can do something else by saying, "I understand it and here's how I look at it," and you give them an explanation to it. There's so many ways to perceive art. There are so many ways to perceive many things that at some point, even if a person tells you that they don't like your art, or they think it's weird, or they try and modify it, somebody out there will think your art was good and they will like what you've done. Your original creation will be perfect to them. Or another person will have a different way of interpreting it, and their interpretation might be more to your liking than how you interpret it.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt that impact of the narrator saying, "You destroyed my work." That's really powerful in that liminal space where it's coming apart and it's ending. And he goes, "You destroyed my work," and he's like, "What am I supposed to do with this? I can't erase that knowledge." And Coda's saying, "You ignored my work. You completely overstepped the point of what this was." So in a way, they're both saying the same thing, but from the opposite perspectives, from the perspective of the actual architect and the person who did the destroying and did the sidestepping, the overlooking of what was the real meaning inside. I don't know if you know about the talk that Davey gave on this that kind of explores these themes in a way that follows up on the comic he drew about the Game of the Year situation with Stanley Parable.
Oh man, there's a lot of things it seems I haven't noticed. I'm gonna have to look into these things because they sound interesting. But no, I don't. I've never. I didn't know he drew a comic as well.
Yeah,
That's
these are things
interesting.
I cover because I am so fascinated with this game and with the emotional experience of creativity, of trying to figure out what am I trying to show people, and then take action that would allow them to, and then what it feels like when they won't even look at it, when they won't even sit there and spend the time to know what it was you were trying to convey. Um, the the work Davey Reedon has done with games to convey that just spoke to me at such a level that it literally caused my creative emergence as somebody who would want to talk about games and do essays and make educational content. He did a lecture to game developers at a college, and he referenced the situation that he fell into after releasing the Stanley Parable and coming into a sudden success and a sudden recognition. And the talk is basically about your creative contract, about why it is that you're making anything that you're making. And the conclusion point in it that I really like is when he describes the value of a game as an art form that holds up solutions to problems that involve creativity as the prime mechanism rather than the prime mechanism being aiming and firing a weapon.
Yeah, because the Stanley Parable is simple at its core. It's a man walking through rooms while somebody talks to you. But when you delve deeper into it and you give it that chance, it is something so much more that most people will grab it and will enjoy the difference that they've experienced. Now, I know people that look at the game and they're just, no, it's boring. This isn't interesting to me. I don't care for it. And that's fine. I can understand that. I can see why they think that. But to the people that see it for the first time and they're immediately entranced. They're like, "Whoa, I was not expecting that like with the blue door, or I was not expecting this with the red door, or wow, that's really interesting to me with the unplugging the phone or the downstairs." Or it's just so there's so many different conclusions you can get and so many different perspectives that are amazing in the game that people perceive. It's incredible their reactions and how they feel. One thing I think one thing I think is really cool is the way the confusing ending works, and it's
Yeah,
the fact that if you've never seen the game before and you put this person on a path where you told them, okay, I'm going to show you, I want to show you something. So you tell them to go to the confusion ending, and then you tell them, okay, now just play, and they have no idea what's going to happen. and the narrator keeps calling out the game's man, like keeps calling out the game's malfunctions and keeps restarting the game. And then the Stanley Parable line happens, and then it doesn't work. So then the narrator puts you on a different path. And when you think you finally found the path, you find the ending telling you what's going to happen. And you see on the wall when you read it that there is more that is supposed to happen, but the narrator just quits. He says, "I'm not doing it. I quit," and the timer stops. It shows that the narrator had a choice somehow in that moment. He had somewhat of a choice to stop this ending from continuing. But at the same time, while he's in the midst of talking and he thinks he's going to get another paragraph out and tell Stanley, like, while we're here, let's do something like this. Let's see if we can find a way out of here, or let's do this with this chair. The game immediately gives you a loud noise. You're not expecting it, and it restarts. And in that moment, it tells you the narrator has some control, but he does not have all the control. Something is still controlling over the narrator.
Yeah, he's there and he's saying, "Hey, I'm trying to show you something. Check this out." And then he's like, "Oh my God, I can't believe this is not working the way it should. What the hell's going on?" And you get to that point, and he's just like, "No, no, f this. I'm out. Will somebody come for us?" And then it slams you with the jump scare. And that's why in my meta Stanley content, where I first started showing people's playthroughs of Stanley, the first thing I show in that whole sequence is a particular player's play of the confusion ending when they got it pretty early. They had done a couple other endings, but the confusion ending is the one I like to think of as the very beginning of the game for a learner who wants to study the Stanley Parable and doesn't know what it is other than what I show them. 'Cause that's my version
Yeah,
of the Stanley Parable, is when I instruct people on it.
yeah, it's an incredible ending that really sets up the Stanley Parable, because I think the other endings do it well. I feel like you could put you could make anybody start to be interested in the game with any ending. Even the basic ending where you follow the narrator and do everything to the end, the very last part where he says what happened to your coworkers, what did the machine mean, all that stuff, and then he dismisses it and he just says that Stanley is happy. It leaves well, and then the game resets. It leaves the person playing it questioning, wait a minute,
Wait, is he really
what did
happy?
happen? Yeah, like, is Stanley happy? First of all, what happened to everyone? And so you go back and you dismiss the narrator, and then you
Yeah.
realize there's so much more. It's a beautiful thing, really, because somebody who could just be playing it for the first time, and they're like, "I'm gonna be good. I'm gonna listen to the narrator," and get to the very end, and the game just resets instead of having a proper ending in quotations. It's interesting because at that moment they realize, wait a minute, that's not it, is it? There's so much more. I could do so much more. And when they start seeing what else they can do and start seeing how big the game actually is, I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Especially with the minor endings too, like the ending where you jump out the window. I love that because you're not going to find that on your own. For the most part, people will never find that on their own. But when they find it, they don't look into it. They're just like, okay, this is an ending. So what does this mean? And when the narrator calls you out and he's like, oh, okay, you think you broke the game, but you didn't. So we're going to be in this white void for a while, and I'm going to give you two options. You want to listen to some music or you don't, or do you like this ending and or you don't? I like that because the narrator basically is like, you didn't do anything special because I let you do this.
Yeah, he just says, "I made this here, and you could come back and see what it looks like if you do it this other way." I happened to find that one. I found almost everything you can do in the game, including some kind of Easter egg endings where you're trapped forever, and it's clearly a bug, but it's very, very entertaining to me. The you come to realize that the game is about authority and who's in charge and what does being in charge mean, and furthermore, what does being happy mean? What is pleasure? What does enjoying this game actually mean? It forces you to confront those questions as you go, and like when he's going on and on about, "Oh, you don't like my game? Then let's go play somebody else's game and see how much do you like that." He presents that question about the pursuit of pleasure in a way that I think is to the very core of the metaphysics of playing games and of enjoying games. And so for me, there's three checkpoints in my feelings. The beginning of the feelings is inside the confusion ending, when he keeps saying, "I can't believe this is going wrong, and now this is going wrong, and now this is going wrong," and then you fall off the rails and you get buzzed back to the beginning with the crash. And then my feelings at the real person ending, when you're above the office and you're just stuck there in the dark void. I think that's the most powerful liminal feeling in the whole game. And then the moment I discover that you can suddenly trick the narrator and get away from him, and he doesn't realize you're gone. That's the sudden leaving ending that I think opens the meaning of that ending. The eighth choice, Stanley's real person koan, is explained by that. When you suddenly realize that you can get away from him, you bamboozle the narrator, and you can go off to the escape pod, which fails to work because he's not there with you, and you've managed to elude the narrator's view.
Yeah. Um, it's just amazing, really. I like the game so much, and I can't wait for the next one to come out because I'm so intrigued as to what will be next. Because we know we're getting our set endings, we know how they work, we have an idea of how they work, we have an idea of what's going on. But I can't wait to see what else they're going to push that will make us think, "Wow, so what was this about? What can we interpret from this? Like, what's going on here?" I think that would be really exciting and interesting. And what was it? One of the trying to think about it. I forget, but one of the endings that's interesting is the cold feet ending, where it's very simple, but the way the narrator is just like, oh, now you have cold feet from uh, going on this thing. Well, guess what? You've already disrupted my story. I'm not going to help you. You're stuck here now. It's good luck, have fun. Like you're stuck in just the mailroom. You're just stuck there until you manually restart the game, or you commit suicide, and that will give you more dialogue.
Yeah, being stuck is really done so well in so many different ways that kind of a form of mind blowing to try and think about what will the experience of playing the next version of the Stanley Parable even feel like. It's like impossible to conceive of with your physical mind.
Yeah, I just these games are up to so much interpretation, but when you have a legitimate talk like this, I've really enjoyed this because this has really been more of like I can try and express how I feel about it, and you can try and express how we feel about it, and we both can just talk about different perspectives of it and agree with what we're saying and understanding the ideas. It's a beautiful thing that I think if Davey saw, he would appreciate, and he would realize like this is what something I was trying to do. I wanted people to start talking in sort of this mythical way of like these games.
Yeah, that's the power of mythos that is invoked when you have somebody's craft that has been developed all the way to its full, complete expression, where people can look at it and really experience those feelings that were being explored in the first place when you were stung by the idea and you could do nothing but scribble it down on a notepad furiously. You end up at a point where you accomplish the meaning of making art, of actually making contact with people, and for people to be able to experience the joy of somebody's creation, to just celebrate it, to spend time speedrunning it, or just wandering aimlessly and spending hours admiring the lounge. These are all things we were able to do because somebody asked those questions and went along the path of finding out what they could make and how could they share that with people. It's definitely been a huge pleasure to bring you on and add your voice to my content about this game because I'm completely overflowing with enthusiasm for it and greater for the whole field of mythos and game enjoyment as a tool for us to actualize joy and to really to be who we are inside and locate our truest selves so that we can overcome those dark places that are inevitable and they have to be there for any of the feelings to exist. But I think to properly appreciate art and live in it and meditate in it is to access the human well-being that Zen kind of basically just points to and says this is the great thing, being a creative person who creates your own adventure and shows it to people.
Yeah, it has been a real pleasure talking about it because while you know I've never really thought this of like I've thought about this game many times before, including the beginner's guide. I've never had a conversation like this before. So to get input from somebody who also, like you said, has a lot of enjoyment from the game and has a lot of thinking about it and has just different ideas and stuff, it's nice to have that sort of feeling that we're able to try and put our own feelings out there and let people know, and people can agree with us and think things differently because when somebody listens to this at some point and they're going to be like, okay, well, I interpret this differently, or this is how I see it. That is perfectly okay because that is also the point of it all. You interpret things differently, you see choices differently, you see things differently, and that is beautiful about this. Is that there is no right answer and there is no wrong answer overall. There is one set thing and we can all get different feelings from it.
Yeah, I'm glad you called that out because that's one of the other prime core pillars inside of Zen thought is the fact that you can't make a mistake. There's no right or wrong way, but the only thing to realize is that there's no other authority. No one's forcing you to do it. You are making choices which ultimately either lead you to something that's celebrating and is true and is resonant, or something that's resisting what's real and causing it not to work correctly because you're kind of circumventing the point of the thing by opposing it and trying to force your will on it all the time. It's really, I think that's the message of games, is to exert our freedom and to moreover spend that time in the joyful space where we understand that we're not making a mistake, we're not trying to please anybody, and we're not trying to create for a contract reason that is corrupt and that doesn't actually lead us to the joy. I highly recommend you listen to that lecture from Davey. I'm still working on excerpting it into a shorter cut because it's like an hour and 20 minutes with the Q&A, and what I focus on is trying to pull like 1 or 2 minute segments of things together into compilations which allow me to talk about the greater message while still summarizing the important details across a long piece of content well enough that you can get it quicker and easier. Because I myself, I love spending hours and hours and hours talking about this, listening to talking about it. This is how I play the Stanley Parable, is to talk about it with you. So it's my deepest gratitude to bring you on and talk about it, because that's literally how I play games. Like, you are playing the Stanley Parable with me now. It's the way of playing the game multiplayer. Um, in a way that's interesting, that transcends the idea of two players with two controllers plugged into the game, because that didn't come to gaming for quite a long time. The idea of the social experience happening in gaming was more like this, more like what the Stanley Parable invites us to do earlier in the game, and Nintendo would sell the game with multiple save files, understanding that there will be different players, but they'll be together interacting with each other as well.
Yeah, the idea that instead of playing a game together, instead you talk about it, and that is therefore playing a game together is a very good way to look at it.
Yeah,
And
precisely. We are playing a game in order to have this conversation. That is gameplay, in my opinion.
exactly. Um, I will listen to it though. I'm also gonna try and look for the comic and stuff and everything. I think I like that sort of thing. It's just I think I'll enjoy listening to Davey overall just talking about it, because
Yeah.
this has been a lot of fun just talking about it. So hearing the creator himself talk about it, I'm sure will bring more things to light for me.
As a creative, he's extremely educational and authentic and sincere. So I'm eternally grateful that he had the courage to confront his joy and bring it forth to show us, because I feel like the whole community of thoughtful gamers and educational interested gamers who are here in the field where we are in speedrunning and in playing a game for its pure celebration value, he did something for gaming, for the whole meta of game making and game experiencing, that is of the same level as Nintendo and what they did to enter and any of the genres or household names that changed gaming. Stanley Parable is one of those names.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with this. Stanley Parable, while doesn't get talked about much, I think when the re-release comes and it gets on consoles and everything, I think that will push a lot of more people to talk about it in different ways. And I'm really excited to see what will be the next conversation for it and what people will say about it. Um,
Yeah.
and just everyone's thoughts about it, especially on Twitch and YouTube. When it comes out, it'll blow up for a while, and while I would like it to last for a while, I know it won't, but I will enjoy what people will look into and see and be like, oh, this is beautiful. I like this. I like that. I like this sort of thing. I interpret it this way. I interpret it this way. This choice, all the things will be amazing to see.
Yeah, when I first began to explore the Stanley Parable as a living game, it was done through interacting with people on Twitch, and there was quite a few that happened before I noticed your stream, but I would be checking on people playing Stanley Parable regularly so I could create content that just involved, let's play the Stanley Parable the way this player is playing it. And so the new release is going to bring so many new people into the Stanley Parable world, irreversibly. Once they come in, you can never ever leave. So we'll be able to experience so many new dimensions of that meta social gameplay aspect as we interact with both new viewers and new players who put their gameplay up on. And I'm very, very excited, but it's also a little bit overwhelming to think about because there's already so much here just in what I've been doing with this year since the summer, since I've been playing the Stanley Parable this way through the metacognition kind of eyes of all the players playing it. That's gonna be exponential when there's a whole new version, and when you and I get to sit down and have episode 2 of this conversation with the Ultra Deluxe gameplay considered.
Yeah, it'll be amazing. I can't wait to stream it when it comes out. I can't wait to play it and just see what new experiences will come from it. I'm really excited because it's one of my favorite games, and the enjoyment I get from it, just a simple idea that's turned into something so much bigger, and I think is beautiful. It's just like Undertale, where it's simple. It looks so simple. It looks cutesy and stuff, but when you play it, you see something incredible happen, and that is something I think a lot of people, I hope, will appreciate, is how simple it looks when you see it for the first time, but how great it can be when you look more into it and you experience it more. And especially with the new endings and the new choices, the new dialogue and everything, I think that will help push it even further.
Yeah, precisely, because when you look at such an instructional object, I call them, a device you can play with or learn about by interacting with it. Um, the narrator says at the end of the demo a line that I like. It's one of my favorite lines across the whole thing. He says, "I want a game about beginnings, and I'm tired of all these endings." And it feels like that when we consider the prospect of a new version coming and that living game world being able to continue expanding. You're talking about that. The game is about beginnings, and so the harder you look at it and try to suss out what it really is, the harder it runs away from you and hides and pops up somewhere else. It's the meaning of Parable is completely exemplified in gameplay that does that, and that's what Undertale did too. Is every possible way of studying it or trying to get underneath the surface would lead you to 10 more questions instead of being able to ascertain its exact physical nature.
Yeah, it will leave so many new players questioning things and feeling different ways that I'm excited to really see like how people feel. And I'm excited to see what we can come up with as people who have enjoyed the original so much. And I can't wait to see if the speedrun community will also burst more into
Oh,
action with that.
yeah, that
Um,
was the other part of the comment of what I just said that I overlooked. Is that's why the act of a speed run of Stanley Parable is so fascinating. It's because you're taking this thing that like dodges your gaze every time you try to suss out its exact nature. Like Boo only goes forward toward Mario when he turns away. So when you turn and look at it, it's like, oh, it's dodging, it's avoiding us. A speed run kind of defies that and takes you through. So here is every possible choke point and break point in the game to see all the different corners and twists and turns it's going to take in as little time as possible. It's just such an enjoyable way to look at the game and elevate the metaphysics of it to a completely even different dimension than the one that was originally felt when you were just first realizing how many layers down the thing goes. Well, then you're on this whole other dimension of plane of existence when you get into what does that speedrun look like and what is the experience of those feelings of the game in the context of how it unfolds in the speedrun and the drama of the whole thing. When I would sit and there was like a 4 or 5 hour session on one of your streams very early when I first came across you, and it was a whole new set of feelings, and I was just captivated in a whole new way. So I figured for sure at some point in the future that we were going to need to expand on that and talk about it and have a conversation like this that allows us to really instruct the real meaning of that passion and what it is exactly in that speedrun meditation that adds and lifts our understanding and our enjoyment of the game to a whole new height.
yeah, for me, speedrunning is uh, it's fun because I get to experience my game in a way. I get to experience the game in a way where, um, instead of looking for the precise things, I do it in a quick manner, but I still hear mostly all of what you hear from the get go. That I think it works beautifully because, again, like I've said before, people who join the stream have never seen the game before. They're captivated because they're not expecting this one thing, and it's a speed run, so you think I'm going to be going really quick, but there are points where I would be just standing and waiting for dialogue, and instead of really doing anything, I'm just listening or I'm just reciting the words of the narrator because that's the point of it. I'm just listening to the narrator talk before I can do a certain action, and it's beautiful because people will see that and be like, okay, this is a completely different speedrun than I expected. It's interesting. I'll continue to watch. And if you play casually, you get that sense of like, you get that sense of when you can see the other things that I'm not doing, the other endings that I'm not going for in that current speedrun, or if I'm not talking over the narrator or something. You get to hear what he's saying. You get to fully capture it. I think it's a beautiful thing. I find it really fun and enjoyable to just play the game over and over again because I never really get tired of it. Is the
Right.
thing for me. I find it
That,
fun to just continuously play.
that's exactly what's so awesome about it is to basically this harkens to something in Zen or Buddhism celebration. What they're doing is like a recitation of the Zen books, and they do it in a way that's hilarious and it completely defies the idea of a serious tone because they're celebrating the book, the work of art that it is, in this way that's rambunctious and like over the top. That's what speedrunning the Stanley Parable feels like to me. It's like we're reciting the playing of the game in the maximum joy way that it's possible for us to celebrate it. So you have my gratitude for showing us that as a means of celebrating our game and gathering together to just experience the drama of like, oh, holy shit, we got a short hallway, or we got two short hallways. In the one I have in my archive for the Stanley content episodes that you did, there was the whiteboard ending room another time, and then there was two additional short hallways. It was like three shortened ones during that run.
Yeah,
It's
that's
amazing.
the best kind of RNG you can get right there.
It's only possible to enjoy a game in that way, in the art of meditating it as a celebration, as a recitation of somebody's work and of the value of it in a way that's happy and is amused and is. Jim Carrey said that he realized the mystic essence was how people wanted to access being free from concern. I feel like the Zen aspect of playing games together in our Twitch setting and celebrating the gameplay just to be here, just to have the peace of that, is invaluable. You can't replicate it in any other way but gathering to celebrate an activity together.
Yeah, I agree. It's a lot of fun, and I'm definitely excited. Again, I know I keep bringing it up, but it's really going to be amazing to see new people play the newer version of the game because uh, you'll see new speedrunners, you'll see new people looking into it, you'll see new like conspiracy theories and stuff about it on YouTube. You'll see new people experiencing the original game plus the newer content. You'll see so many different aspects of it that it'll be incredible for people who already enjoy the game so much to see so many new people enjoying the game and grasping their first experience like we did so many years ago.
It's really mind blowing. It calls the whole meaning of what the word universe means. It means one turn. So you can only turn once. You can't turn again and look at yourself. It feels like going into a new version of the Stanley Parable is really just this metaphysical impossibility. It just seems like a puzzle in and of itself, and I'm very, very excited to go along and check it out. So, this conversation has gone on for a bit of time, so I wanted to ask you if you have any questions for me or anything else you wanted to touch on or discuss.
Um, what really got you into this whole Zen like video game like style? Like, what really got you into this sort of idea?
Well, there was a game that actually comes before the Stanley Parable in my timeline. Comes between Nintendo and PC gaming like Doom and Diablo. And I was going to mention Fallout 1. Fallout 1 is another game that plays much like Stanley Parable or Undertale, where there's a whole array of possible um, optional things you can do or not do along the way to cause interesting outcomes that are both varied and non-linear, where you could, in one instance, you can skip to the end of the game through a very early location in the game before you finish the first major quest that it kind of puts you on a time limit and requires you to do first. You can actually cheese that timer by accessing one of the endings of the game from a secret facility interaction that you can have. So, like, Fallout 1 is, I would say, the first game other than Doom, Diablo, and some of the early PC adventure games like Myst and Mario 64 and the early Nintendo stuff that started me along the path toward studying Zen and understanding gameplay in a metaphysical kind of celebration sense. Uh, but then the game Flower by that game company, and then they made a sequel, a completely different game, but I think of it as a sequel, Journey, is the other game that goes here in this particular answer, because what those games did to me is created a feeling that was literally nonverbal. It was completely indescribable with words, because the experience of the gameplay in Flower is that you are wind and you are petals and you are flying through environments and you kind of channel the wind, and it's completely inexplicable. So I've been making content to try and hold up the instructional vibe of that game and construct storytelling about my story specifically of exactly how I came through these learning, not understanding what it meant, but carrying it forward like a code I contained that I finally became able to scan the code and figure out what does it actually mean. How do I put this in words and tell you what it means? It was the game Flower that first gave me what I would call the mystical, eternal feelings of just being completely electrified with the feeling of motion and with the physical, like nature greatness feeling. It's so hard to use words to explain it, but Flower is literally like the meaning of Zen by presenting a gameplay experience where you're not a person, your character's not human, you are the nature and the wind and everything.
What's this game on? Like, what
Well, it's
console?
on everything now. They've released it on Epic and Steam, but it was originally a PS3 game, so the only reason I even
Uh,
experienced it is my roommate had been playing it on PS3 one day when I came home from work.
I'll have to check this game out because this sounds very interesting.
Some
It sounds nice.
some people can't play it because of the camera, they get motion sick. So like the experience of this game, I've also been pondering how do I make content that would hopefully help me bypass that and allow me to present its feeling and its vibe to people, even those who might not have been able to play it because of their motion sickness struggles with the camera. But in Journey, your player is a person. You are like a human avatar, but the gameplay is remarkably similar. It features flight and traversing breathtaking places, and the end result is that it's a lot more linear than like Stanley Parable is an experience, but somehow still accomplishes the feeling of letting you walk up to the boundary of what the game is and then step outside of it and explore, escape that boundary and explore it from the other side where you're looking in through the window at the environment and the characters, and you're exploring both the perspective of the game place and the perspective of the person looking in on the game. And further, you're able to traverse scaffolding, which is touched on in Stanley Parable's corners, where you're kind of getting to the part where the game hasn't been made yet, and it's like the edge and the boundary. But in Journey, I feel like they almost designed it like this on purpose. You're literally allowed to walk outside the level in certain places and just examine the beauty of the level from the perspective of somebody who is building it, from the scaffolding of the maker, and like look at the skybox, like in Beginner's Guide when he says, I love how you can see the bottom of the universe from here. It's those kind of feelings that is explored in these games in a way that at first you're like, well, they didn't mean to do that. Clearly that's a bug. But then later, when you discover how many of them there are, you're questioning that. You're like, maybe they did mean to make this. Maybe they did mean for the experience of this game for the player to be allowed to traverse the entire surface from both inside and outside of these boundaries. It's utterly fascinating. These are games that are absolutely required playing and viewing for the kind of content that Stanley Parable players are interested in, for sure.
All right, I'll have to. I have Journey on my PS4 because it was free for a while, so I might have to
Yeah.
actually play that game again. I didn't really start it or anything, so I need to look more into that.
These are games
But
that will impact you. They will make a huge, huge um, metaphysical energy. They're indescribable. I started with those games, and when Journey came out was about the same time that I was catching on to the Stanley Parable demo and the fact that the full version was under development.
yeah, though that sounds very interesting. I'm gonna have to check out Journey, when I have the time and stuff, and just really enjoy it as a whole. Um, Overall, I think this was a very nice conversation, and I'm glad that you've had me come on here and just talk with you for a couple hours and just talk about how we feel about a game that we both really enjoy and stuff. And it was a big pleasure, and I really do appreciate the experience and just the overall conversation.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you for coming on. I wasn't sure if you have a lot of time to do this because I'm not a person who's very good at planning things in advance at all. And but it helps me kind of read the flow of energy in art. It's like you can't box it in. There's no possible way to schedule something artistic to happen, so you kind of just have to decide that you're going to do it and then put it on like a queue, a pile, and then you can pick something up from that pile and say, I think I'll do this one, or I think I'll do that one today. That's what I think the act of streaming does, is it lets you tap into a creative vibe that is unstructured enough to the degree that you're able to discover the real essence of your feelings and other people's feelings when you have these interactions that can only happen because you and I are gathering in the place that is the Stanley Parable. So I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, this is I agree with the Twitch streaming ideas because whenever you stream, you pick out a certain thing you want to do and you do it and you do it in your own way, your own your own special touch to it, whether it's commentary, podcast, arts, there's so many ways to do streaming that there isn't a wrong way to do it. You just
Yeah.
do it in your own way, and it's a great experience, really.
Yeah, I would say I was deeply affected by streaming personalities and looking at their different ways of sharing their joy and their content and their creativity and just the whole variety of different things you could show or choose to show and gather around on Twitch. I think that's kind of like the final thing that walked me up from that deeply affected place those games had left me into a place where I was able to, first of all, collaborate with myself, discover my own way of creating words about these games, and from there turn that into what I now call my monastery format, where I come here and I work on this kind of content and things about the Stanley Parable or any other game or educational info that I can come across, and I can't stop doing it because it's just such the center of my passion to come into the creative space and just find out what I can make that is necessarily focused on that whole mechanic, the mechanic of any given person being able to learn how to figure out what they can make.
Exactly. Streaming as a whole has been really fun for me. It's taught me to just enjoy the things I like and just share it and go with the flow. And you know, as a small streamer, you're not. I've learned that don't expect to have a crazy people are gonna be there all the time and stuff. I've learned that that's okay and to just have fun with it. And if people stick around and are entertained, then that is enjoyment I can enjoy. I can enjoy giving enjoyment to people and knowing that they're having fun watching me just play a game or do something else. And I really like that experience. It's it's a lot of fun to me.
That's the most important thing is to do it. If you listen to the lecture by Davey, I actually have an excerpted version I can play. We can listen to at the end of this, or put it at the end in this same episode, because I'm kind of planning on compiling this different content that comes before this conversation in with this, and I'll probably segment it into different pieces and then present different Stanley content that I've made in between, so that you might view this as like a several session long, like continuous stream that would ultimately take like the length of multiple feature films to actually go through, but that every single 10-minute block of it is going to be something that shows you a piece of the game that I love and the information about creating and about accessing your joy and sharing it with people all along the way. Um, that's something Davey specifically speaks to when he talks about the creative contract in that lecture. So I can send you a link to the excerpt I have from that or the full version where I have a bit of commentary on it, and I have it combined with another talk that's about the question about what exactly can video games do for us that is of real benefit. That's kind of the whole core premise of my channel, is to go against people who detracted from my joy and insulted my art form and blamed violence on it and all these other things all along the way were detractors of what I do. I'm trying to show the world that the game is a tool for our joy, and it's literally just our art that is more intricate and infinitely more capable of impacting us and allowing us to interact as creative people and people who create together. It's an interaction between playful creatives and creative players who you can't get that through any other. You can't really get it through a book or through film, although you can get certain aspects of it, like the X-Files is an example of a show, which is actually a game that doesn't give you a controller. It works exactly the same way as a video game, only it is taking place as drama on screen instead of with a player being able to choose exactly where the characters are going, but yet you're still seeing choices and consequences and authority and the questions about joy and about pain being played out. It's just a phenomenal series.
Yeah, the X Files is a really good example of that. And the overall aspect of what we've been talking about and everything. Uh, I think it's all been it really shows. Plus, people video games are such a it's a media where people think it's childish when in reality it can be it's just as great as actual painting art or other forms of media like movies and stuff where yeah you might be playing a game but it can have moving themes like the Stanley Parable and Beginner's Guide and other games like it. And I think that's really something I hope one day people understand and start looking more into and start realizing that it isn't just violence or anything, but it's more beautiful than that.
Yep, it's about human contact. It's about the interaction of a person with themselves and with each other who actually bother to look and get to know somebody's inner joy, which can only happen by discovering it, by looking for it and sharing it. So, in the mythos of my education, I use a phrase I borrowed from Alan Watts, who basically lectures on this topic. He was a philosopher who lectured about specifically about gameplay, but he used the phrase important games. And that's the standpoint I'm coming from. And actually, the Stanley Parable walked me up to that without me understanding what it was. It introduced me, in essence, to the beginning of what that would mean and what my whole direction of what brings me the most joy. What is the reason I can wake up and face any given day is because this is what I do. I spend my time exploring the joy and showing it to people, and I can't live my life any other way but to invite others into the space to see the game and to learn about it, because I just spent so much of my life having unnecessary disagreements and conflicts, and the definition of what human contact isn't with people, missing the point, missing the actual benefit of playing and of celebrating artwork. It was just, it drove me to such a point that it's not to prove anybody wrong, it's just to practice the thing that gives me joy, no matter how much they detracted from it and told me it would never take me anywhere in my life and that I should not waste my time with it and make something of myself instead. I'm like, I can't do that. The only thing I can do is discover what I'm able to make and show that to people and hope that they will also be lifted by it.
And I hope that it works out fully, because I think it is a very beautiful thing that you're trying to do and that you're currently making. And I hope people can see it and be moved by it, and realize that there's so much more to video games and other types of media and smaller things in life and stuff like that. I think it really is a great thing that you're trying to do, and I appreciate your efforts into doing it.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, just having anybody involved at all. I don't have much of a following currently, but I don't need it, because what I'm making is, it's the whole point of it is to be left there for somebody to find, much like all the intricate corners of the Stanley Parable. I'm making something that you would be able to come and look at as a process, as something you would never ever be able to sit and consume in one sitting, and you would have to choose which part of it to explore. If you were to, discover a treasure chest full of the archive of what I've made, for example, that's the whole idea of the mythos of what I do. But to include others in it is what I've recently been thinking about, greater than just including clips of their gameplay or pieces of what they've made. I also am learning how to turn it into interaction, so we'll probably do more episodes like this in the future, and I'll invite you back. But this is actually the first episode of this kind of content that I've done or attempted to do. I did hold a phone call with my friend, but like I've hung out with him and stuff in real life. But I'm looking forward to maybe making this a format that could have multiple participants, and we could cover other games and also cover an aspect of game designing and creating new experiences, but doing so in the collaborative format that we're using now. I think it's a whole frontier of creativity that we could yet explore further, and this is really just the first step into exploring it.
Well, I'm excited to see what else comes from it. I'm excited to see what you're gonna make with it, and I'd be glad to come back and talk more about the Stanley Parable when the new one comes out, or maybe something else that we might have interest in. And just overall, I think it would be very cool when people see this, and I hope that someone out there will, you know, get it. Someone will show it to other people because they think it's worth showing.
Exactly. That's the inner meaning, is to make something that allows people to see what they're enjoying and what their joy is, enough to where they could show it and where they could get to that point and say, this is important. I love this. And that's ultimately when I get into the actual metaphysics of human contact. When the Stanley Parable is made, or when anything is made that involves humans experiencing what human means, that's human contact, and that's our way of saying the basic, simple truth of love for another person, is to be able to say, this is important, this is awesome, this is excellent. I want to share it with you, and I want to include you in it because it's awesome. That's the actual meaning of Zen, is to access that human contact and get rid of everything that gets in the way of that, and just come past those barriers and just have human contact that is joyful and is celebrating. Um, we managed to take up the entire stream time I had blocked out for my stream today, so I'm gonna let you go. And we'll close this episode, and we can do a sequel to it next time when I have another concept for us to discuss.
All right. Well, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. And again, what you're doing is really amazing, and I hope it can go even further than what you might think it can, or just people can see it and really enjoy it. So thank you again for having me on, and it was very, very fun having to talk to you, or getting to talk to you, and just it was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, and we will do it again soon. Okay, man?
All right.
All
I
right, bye.
will catch you later. Yes.
Times it will crash your computer and start consideration that some empathy for others. But until I figure out how to do that, I think we should take some time here at the end of the video just to piss him off a bit. Stanley. 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 Stanley.
Now imagine yourself with a spherical eye. You see all around. Now what's in the middle? See? Even if I have all this behind me in view, suddenly I will find that there is something in the middle of it all. There's a hole in the middle of reality. Like now, there seems to be not so much a hole, but a wall. But any animal which had eyes in the back of its head would have the sensation I'm describing. Now, you may say to me, eternity, it's a curious thing. How can I face the fact of nothing, which is by definition not a fact? You see? Why, that's one of the people who want to rule the world. It's frightening you about death. Death is real, see? I mean, don't indulge in wishful thinking. All you people who dream of an afterlife and heavens and gods and mystical experiences and eternity, oh, you don't face the facts. What facts? How can I face the fact of nothing, which is by definition not a fact? You see? All this is eternity, from whichever way you look at it. So if you really go the whole way and see how you feel at the prospect of vanishing forever, of all your efforts and all your achievements and all your attainments turning into dust, nothingness, what is the feeling? What happens to you? It's a curious thing that in the world's poetry, this is a very common theme. The earthly hope men set their hearts upon turns ashes, or it prospers, and anon, like snow upon the desert's dusty face, lighting a little hour or two, is gone. All kinds of poetry emphasizes the theme of transience. And there's a kind of nostalgic beauty to it. A banquet hall deserted. After the revelry, all the guests had left, gone their ways. The table with overturned glasses, crumpled napkins, breadcrumbs, dirty knives and forks lies empty. And the laughter echoes only in one's mind. And then the echo goes. The memory, the traces are all gone. That's the end, you see. Now imagine yourself with a spherical eye. You see all around. Now what's in the middle? See? Even if I have all this behind me in view, suddenly I will find that there is something in the middle of it all. There's a hole in the middle of reality. Like now, there seems to be not so much a hole, but a wall. But any animal which had eyes in the back of its head would have the sensation I'm describing. Now, you may say to me, eternity, oh, it's a curious thing. Eternity. How can I face the fact of nothing, which is by definition not a fact? You see? Why, that's one of the people who want to rule the world. It's to frighten you about death. Death is real, see? I mean, it's just, don't indulge in wishful thinking. All you people who dream of an afterlife and heavens and gods and mystical experiences and eternity, oh, you don't face the facts. What facts? How can I face the fact of nothing, which is by definition not a fact? You see? All this is eternity, oh, from whichever way you look at it.
Going round and round and round. After a while, one's experience begins to have what I would call a haven't we been here before feeling. And then you begin wondering, where am I going? What do I want to happen? And, of course, as soon as you ask yourself that, you begin to fantasize. And so I soon found myself at a great push-button place, with buttons available for every conceivable thing I could wish. All possible pleasures are available. You know, you go going like that, and here is Cleopatra. You press this button, symphonic music. So I simply set myself to thinking through how far we could go. Now, you suddenly notice there's a button labeled surprise. You push that, and here we are.